Hey everybody, I'm PJ from Git Butler. Today we're going to talk about we're going to talk about Git, but we're generally talking about why developer tools are still so important. So I'm here with Git Butler. I think most of you stopped by the table. If you haven't stopped by the table, please do, and please take all of the stuff that's on the table. We don't want to bring it home. But in general, Git Butler is what Git would look like if it were designed today. Visual workflows, parallel changes, a lack of branch chaos. And we want to make Git feel more modern. You can work on multiple changes at once without juggling branches or stashing, and your repo stays clean. So less Git gymnastics, more building, and it's free. So, use it. Also, we do a little bit of karaoke from time to time, as some of you may have discovered last night. But that's not the point of the talk, believe it or not. I hope everybody had fun last night. For those of us who couldn't make it to my talk, I hope you had a great time last night, and I'm sorry about your morning. Maybe your morning is not as good. But so in the olden times, and when I say the olden times, I mean a little over 30 years ago, options for version control and code collaboration were staggeringly small. Projects that had a ton of developers that were widespread geographically, and they had a lot of software changes. They had to be passed around with patches, and you had to reapply once you had those patches. This led to a lot of issues, like working on code that was super out of date, collisions and things being programmed, people programming the same thing in parallel, not knowing the other one was doing it. And it slowed down the whole software cycle to a grind. And you'll notice I said software cycle, not software life cycle, because there was no life. There were just emails, just lots of emails. So there were tools like SVN, also known as Subversion, and CVS, not the pharmacy, but concurrent version systems. But they had to be hosted somewhere, and this is a pre-cloud world. So even in the the 90s and the early 2000s, people were emailing patches back and forth to each other, and occasionally they'd put them on jump drives or flash drives, or they would burn them into a CD, send it to someone else. That person would then take the CD, get the code off of it, rip it, and that could take hours or weeks or months to get the latest changes, only to discover that everything you've done locally is completely out of date with what everyone else is doing. So along comes the year 2000. This is the future, folks. The people at the Linux kernel started to use a project called BitKeeper. So this was a huge innovation. Things went fairly smoothly for a while. It seemed that finally somebody had built something that could help this group that had a gigantic project. The Linux kernel was gigantic. And they could move things closer to what they wanted. They could share code. The cloud was kind of in its baby form, so you could do a few things here and there. You could do things remotely. You could contact a remote server through this thing called FTP, the File Transfer Protocol. Believe it or not, kids, the File Transfer Protocol is still available today. There's also SFTP, which is Safe File Transfer Protocol. If you're going to try out FTP, go with SFTP. It's a lot better. But, it was super cool. Actually, how many people remember FTP? Oh my God, this is why I love Ruby conferences. Everybody's so awesome. But, it was so fast. It was so simple. It was so full of collisions and problems and phone line issues. But there'd still have to be a little bit of coordination via email, or people would have to call each other and say, hey, I FTP'd my stuff up. This is where my software career started, was FTPing stuff. You'd write things all day, 8 hours of programming. Then you would FTP them up to the boss, and the boss would go, no, that was actually not what I was looking for. Try again tomorrow. But the beauty was, for Linux kernel, they had BitKeeper, and that was great, but nothing good lasts forever. In 2005, the company that owned BitKeeper was like, yo, Linux kernel, listen up. Y'all can't keep using this for free. We need to charge you for this. So pay or GTFO. And to be clear, this is not going to be an anti-capitalist rant. I know we give software away for free, but not against people who want to make money. And also, there are a lot more political things that are involved in that interaction between the makers of BitKeeper and the Linux kernel about competition. But this is a brief history, so let's keep it brief. So I'm happy to talk about that later. But what do good open source developers do when faced with the choice of paying for something or finding a new solution? They start coding. So something fast, straightforward, focused on branching, being fully distributed, and able to handle a large project like the Linux kernel. Those were the specs that made Git. Those are what they built Git based on. So I'm not here to glaze anyone's ego, and to be clear, no one person came up with or developed Git. Even this guy was not the sole person behind Git. And he can be kind of a jerk, but supposedly like he's working on it. Supposedly, I don't really know, but he is better than he was in 2000. It did, however, require a lot of domain-specific knowledge. And if you remember the Linux kernel back then, like it was like nerds, like they were really into what they were doing, but everything was like esoteric and weird and internalized. So you did need to know a little bit about what was going on before you started to use Git. It was a command line tool, which is super common at the time. It had a wide command set of instructions, and it still does. And not long after its inception, it had a place to keep all those code repos that everybody was so busy building all the time. But we'll get to that in a bit. At the time of Git's inception, there were not tons of repos or places to keep the code. It was very limited, and it had to keep track with a kind of an uncertain future. Like no one knew if this Git thing was going to work out, and there were many competitors in the space. So quick diversion. This is the kind of concept. Early on, there were Git users and there were Git power users, but all of them were the same group of people, developers. Even now, for most of us, we know a few Git commands. These are the commands we use every single day. These are the commands that you don't even have to think about because you know how to push, you know how to pull. Maybe you don't know all like the little decorators that go on at the end, or you can't like adjust it. But these are the things you absolutely know. We know how to check status. We know how to push and pull code. We know how to add new files. And when Git became common around 2005, and other people outside the Linux kernel started using it, these commands like became ingrained. Like they were motor memory. You don't even have to think about it to use them. But most of us are actually just scratching the surface. Strangely, even these commands, like eventually if you move away from them, your muscles start to atrophy and you start to forget. Young developers are not actually being taught Git very much. We're gonna get more into that later, but it's a huge concern. They're not Git literate. Most people aren't super hyper Git literate, but a lot of new developers aren't at all Git literate. So let's take a look at some of the things that led to where we are today. First of all, modern Git hosting strategies really began to happen around the same time as Git. Luckily, there was this dude and his friends who started this company, and they just happened to bet correctly on the right thing. So GitHub. He also happened to make another company called Git Butler. Also, he's really into show tunes at karaoke, in case you didn't pick up on that last night. But he does a great talk about why GitHub won, and it really was about luck, timing, and you happen to have the right feature set. GitHub is still 90% of the market today, give or take a few percentage here and there. Back then, though, Git and GitHub had plenty of competitors because people were like, well, if BitKeeper's not going to do it, we can create a thing. We can do this. We can work with Mercurial. We can work with this. We can do whatever we want. But people seem to really like GitHub for its simplicity. They like Git for its simplicity. The two things kind of worked out to be the ultimate tool set. And again, this is a time where we're still building essentially like simple web applications, like e-commerce application, real easy thing, not tons of end users. Also, to add to the success of GitHub, one of the things that really mattered was the Ruby community was being built at that time. Like there was a small community, then Rails came out, then it was a huge community. It was really an amazing time to be a developer. But like I said, most of the applications were simple. Nowadays, applications are getting more and more complex. So did our use of Git and the forges that exist. So things like GitLab and Bitbucket grew from the foundations of GitHub and started to expand into things like DevOps and continuous integration before GitHub ever even got there. But at the heart of things, Git remained the way that we control the versions of our software. So even as you're moving through those tools, you're realizing that there's like a lot of things going on, but it's still Git at heart. So most developers, though, hadn't grown much beyond where they were before. They were still in the beginner Git phases, using advanced functions to avoid conflicts and other issues. It might occur, and you might like look into it and like, you know, Stack Overflow or something, and you might get a right answer. But for most part, like a lot of people would be like, oh no, I have a giant merge conflict. Well, I'll just wipe out this whole repo. I'll reclone it. We'll start from scratch. What could go wrong? So many things. But they could have put in a little bit of effort to learn more Git and build up their developer tool set so they could better kind of beat the conflict before it arose or deal with the issue. That, and we have a market now that has so many forges that are varying good things. There's a push toward AI, and new developers are coming into the market with that limited knowledge. So they don't understand Git as well. They don't understand version control. Some of them don't even understand why these are things. It all adds up to Git being a consistent but ill-used tool at best. It's a second-class citizen when it comes to the world of LLM and code agents. So, and Git really isn't to blame. It hasn't changed much in 20 years. Like, not a lot has gone on inside of its ecosystem to make it a bombastic, super amazing thing. But our focus on its importance has really changed. The second-class citizen Git faces obstacles if it wants to remain relevant as we move forward into this new future of AI. So, Git matters in the modern era still because even after all these years, it's still the method that we use to access version control. It's built for scale, and that was from its inception, like I mentioned. It remains the best option for keeping track of your code, in my personal opinion, but it also allows you to work individually in a team, which is something that a lot of other things don't. It left behind things like Mercurial and other version control things because it was, hello. I had an idea. This is so bad for people with ADD. But you know, it's easy to use. People could access it, and like it still got to move along with the Linux kernel, which got better and better. And it was a massive project, and it was built to scale, which a lot of these other options were not built to scale. So it continues to give us a great overview of our code, where it is now, where it was before, and if absolutely necessary, where we can go back if we mess it up. So try to think of a software that you use, like any piece of software that you use, that's as powerful as Git, that it can give you that much functionality just out of the box, just by installing it. I mean, can you? If anyone can think of something more powerful than Git the way I've described it, I'm happy to talk with you after the fact. We can fight outside. So Git 1, it's ubiquitous, everybody has it. That said, code bases are huge now. I sometimes get into arguments about why, but that's a whole other subject. Teams are much more distributed. We're all over the globe. Like, it's not just like, oh, so developers are in the US and Europe. No, they're literally everywhere. There are developers in Antarctica. And deployment cadences have changed. When I started my career, we deployed once a month. And we were considered pretty swift about that. People were like, wow, that's super dangerous. We only deploy once every 6 months. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Now people deploy, Etsy deploys 26 times a day. 26 times a day. Every code change gets deployed. But that's because of things like continuous integration that help us build those things. Continuous deployment is a major DevOps function. But it doesn't really reflect all of the problem. Going back to the Git literacy issue and Git fluency, using the same 6 daily commands does not mean that we are power Git users. While Git is successful, we need to wonder where does its depth bring us? Like, it has so many things that we can use, but if we're not taking advantage of it, how good is Git? I also mentioned the lack of Git education for new developers. When I went to school, Git wasn't a thing yet. I think that's pretty clear. I said 20 years, and I'm obviously more than 30 years old. Okay, nobody said, no, PJ, you look great. That's called fishing for compliments, and I didn't catch anything. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you, Caleb. It's my son, Caleb. But it wasn't a thing. Like, we didn't learn anything back then about version control because version control wasn't a concern. Most developers were kind of working separately or working in some gigantic place that like version control wasn't an issue. Then all of a sudden we had like a lot of like Git workshops. Like when Git became a thing, I learned a lot of Git by going to Ruby conferences, especially from a guy named Jim Wyrick, who was absolutely brilliant, amazing guy. And this wouldn't be a Ruby conference if someone didn't mention him, so I'll be that guy. But there were books and you did everything. And then as things moved on, like schools and universities started to be like, yeah, we should probably teach our kids about this Git thing. By the time they graduate, they should definitely have a GitHub account. That became important. Boot camps were huge and they taught Git, but a lot of boot camps started to die out. A lot of universities started to say, maybe we don't have time to teach that because we have to teach them so many other things. So it became, again, a second-class citizen. And the question is why? So what were the obstacles? And the first obstacle, and this is going back almost to the inception of Git, was the world's largest stage, enterprise software. So it can be hard to define what that means, and everybody says it, but generally, according to the dictionary, enterprise software is specialized computer software designed to meet the complex needs of larger organizations. The other term that I usually use for enterprise software is terribly built software. This is coming off a year and a half at IBM, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. Generally, these large organizations, they move at a slower pace. It's glacial. They do not get into new functionality very quickly. They can't. It's a risk. And when you're talking about billions of dollars, billions of users, you can't just say, all right, well, we'll just switch our version control program. For example, so I just finished at IBM back in October when I joined the Git Butler team. Before I worked at IBM, I also worked at IBM in 2016. And when I was there, they had just discovered this crazy new concept. Have you heard of it? It's called Agile. There's a book about it. It was written in like 1997, but like they had just figured that out in 2016. That gives you kind of the impression of how long it takes enterprise software companies to figure something out. They're woefully behind. And this includes like lifelong enterprise engineers who are like, I love the stability of my job working in enterprise software. I love my gray cubicle with my gray clothes, my khaki pants. But like it's sad because there's often things they can take advantage of. And I've met a lot of people at Ruby meetups and different conferences and different places that are like, I'm here because I love this. My day-to-day job sucks, but I love this and I do it in my spare time. So they'll learn Git on the outside, but they don't get to use it on the inside. Customization becomes a problem. And this isn't just a problem in the enterprise, this is a problem with everything. So if the enterprise has a custom solution, shouldn't everyone ditch the norms and start building their own custom solutions? Doesn't that make sense? Custom workflows, custom tooling, custom forks of Git, custom repo tools, all of this custom. You want to stand out in the world of tech, right? You want to make a difference, make a splash, make a scene. And I'd argue that building custom tools only makes sense when you're a tool building company. Architects don't decide to build special hammers for every project. They design buildings. Focus on designing the building. Forget about building the actual tools if you're not a tool company. Leave the tool building to the tool builders. A good example of this actually is jujitsu. So some people know about jujitsu. They call it JJ. It is a Git-like version control tool from the folks at Google. Google builds tools. They're not just a search engine. Leave that epically faded idea far behind. They are a tool building company. So it's okay for them to try and build something like that. It doesn't make sense for something like, IBM to try to build tools. So they don't build tools, they build shitty software. So add to all those obstacles, all the distractions of the modern developer workflow. Look at the blockchain. Check out Web3, it's the future. Look at my AI coding agent. All this will solve all of our problems. The golden hammer has been found. Why worry about your tools when you can just wish a code base into existence? And distractions are just that. Day to day, we still need to build code. And day to day, if we admit it to ourselves, we can call it whatever we want. We're still building websites, folks. Like, that's what we do. We build websites. We want to build applications that work, and they make work easier. That's the point of building technology. You build tools that make things easier for human beings. Advanced Git is hard. That's another obstacle. Remember when we talked about those daily commands, those 6 or 7 commands everybody knows? And what happens when there's a conflict or a problem? Panic, absolute panic, and you do something crazy. Or you go to your LLM and you say, hey, tell me. And many junior developers not learning Git, like they could go read this book, this cool guy who maybe pays most of my bills, he wrote it, but we had a conversation about it a while ago. He's like, I know no one reads my book. No one reads it because if you get past chapter 3, you will be blown away by the amount of stuff you can do with Git. But nobody gets past chapter 3 because that gets beyond those 7 commands they already know. Then, of course, there's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, artificial intelligence. I'm not going to waste your time talking about how modern AI is marketing, and it's not actually artificial intelligence, it's just LLMs, which are large-scale databases that you're allowed to use regular language to interact with instead of writing SQL statements. That's another topic. But, and to be fair, like it's an important tool. It's another developer tool in my mind. And at Git Butler, we have AI integration. We use AI every day. But what does that mean for Git itself? Like, is this just another abstraction from people so they don't have to understand Git? Doesn't that kind of hurt our version control abilities a little bit? If we no longer remember how to do these things, it's kind of hurts. And what happens if we can't get unstuck or there's a hallucination and we get stuck in one direction and now we've actually borked our repo? It can be dangerous. Oddly though, AI is one of the only tools that is actually kind of a little bit helping improve the Git workflow, because most of the time when you interact with it, it explains to you what it's doing. If you're using a good agent, it explains to you what it's doing. So you can learn and theoretically not have to rely on that ever again. But we don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years. It could be crazy. So again, one of the biggest drawbacks for young developers and those just reaching the job market is that Git and version control in general is not a focus that they've come up with. They don't think about it, it's not part of their daily retinue. And that means we need to focus, the advanced developers, the senior developers, the people that are leading teams, on getting them on board, bringing them in and upskilling them on Git. And we need to do it quickly. When it comes to bringing in new people, having their tool set laid out before them makes it easier. So I mentioned that concept of Agile. So Agile kind of says we're all using the same tools. We should all be able to do the same things. Maybe not with the same level of ability, but we should all be moving in the same direction. So when you say, this is how we use Git here, that should be a day one situation. It's just like saying, yes, we all use MacBooks. Yes, we all use Postgres. Yes, we all use Ruby. Yes, that's what we do. Also, by the way, we use Git. Here's how we use it. This is what our workflow looks like. Boils down to if someone doesn't come in with domain knowledge, there's no way they're going to be able to figure out the workflow. You're putting them a month or two behind. And you're going to wonder, like, why did we hire this person? They don't know what they're doing. It's not as universal as people think. So everyone needs to know Git. But again, we don't always see the productivity gains we get from leveraging Git to its fullest. When it comes to things like new team members, recovering from incidents, both catastrophic and fairly straightforward, even things like compliance, a major sticking point for the enterprise, all of this is affected by your Git workflow. Your ability to use Git is based on how fast you can respond to an issue. If we treat Git and our workflows as second-class citizens, we end up with problems. When a real catastrophic problem arises, well, now suddenly we have to fight Git along with fighting whatever our code is doing, and that just doubles things, if not triples it. We end up trying to resolve things and we don't know how. We have to sit there and dig ourselves out of what we've buried ourselves into. And there's so many other moving parts to your workflow. It's hard to keep track of the latest everything for every tool everywhere. We've traveled from building websites in HTML and CSS with maybe some PHP or Ruby or JavaScript on the back end to handle the dynamic parts. How many people have ever, and or within the last 10 years, tried to write a static site in HTML and CSS? How'd you deploy it? Because that shit's hard. No one wants that anymore. They're like, where's your JavaScript? Don't need it. It's a static site. That's another fun conversation. But this is when I say the hard part. Because applications are so much more diverse than they used to be, not many places are doing just Ruby on Rails or Python and Django or even just PHP. Like we're doing Ruby backends with Python analytics engines and JavaScript front ends of every flavor. This creates a deeper problem. This means our skills really need to be top notch. While Git itself is slow to change, the modern landscape means that we need to be able to use this in different ways. So every proposal, every generated PR is submitted through a Git branch. These tools like CodePilot, Cursor, all the agents, Windsurf, they don't compete with Git. They're built on top of it. They believe in Git. They understand it for the most part. They use Git diffs to understand what changed in your code history. They use your commit history to understand the context that they're supposed to be carrying forward. They use blame to understand risk. If you have messy Git history or vague commit messages or giant PRs that make no sense or no branching strategy, you just commit everything to main. Yay, please don't do that, please. You're feeding garbage context to these tools, and we've been saying in technology for years, garbage in, garbage out, and people still don't get it. Good Git hygiene makes you a better developer and makes your AI tools better at helping you. So that's a computing advantage. After all this, we can speculate a little bit about what's going to happen to Git over time. Like I said, it's a 20-year-old tool. One of the things that we can speculate is that AI is going to get much more involved in it. OpenAI announced that it's going to build an alternative Forge. We'll see if that happens, or if they run out of money in June. But it makes sense. It goes back to the custom software idea. These companies want to build something that makes sense in the modern world, and they're worried that this 20-year-old tool might not do it for them. They're worried that things like GitHub, that has been around just as long, might not be the solution for them. So they're going to customize. Also, they probably need something they can charge people for so they can make a little bit of money because they're currently losing a lot of money. Which is not to say Git can't handle the problems they have. It's just to say that their philosophy is everything needs to be AI native, AI first. Maybe that's the right philosophy. Maybe it isn't, but we'll see. Beyond the AI factor, we probably need more visual-based systems. Every day as developers come in, they are seeing tools that are more visually based. So I mentioned that the command line was really popular back in the early 2000s. Command line is still very popular, but there's like 85 flavors of it. Also, they stick a terminal in your VS Code instance. They stick a terminal in all these things. You can add several different terminals. So the terminal I use is the one that comes with my machine, because it functions well and it works. I don't screw around with iTerm or anything like that. Well, like, why bother? It's just another abstraction. And abstractions make it more difficult to remember what's actually going on at the base level. I'm not going to argue that you should move off of the cloud and start using bare metal servers or anything like that. But we're Ruby developers. We know that one of the first abstractions we ever worked with was Rails. If you think like, and one of the biggest complaints was like, I'm not comfortable because, well, it does 90% of the work in 10% of the time. It's all auto magical and I don't know what's going on under the hood. And then these same people a few years later are like, I love my code agent. Like whatever I ask it, it gives me the right answer. It's like, okay, if you thought Rails was auto magical, Jesus, man. But what if in the next 5 years all this changes? No Git, no GitHub, no GitLab, no all new forges, all new version controls, AI overhanging all the things. So we don't need to worry about conflicts or crashes or where the code goes between writing the code and deploying it. Maybe the concept of deployment and observability will go away too. We don't even need to watch it anymore. We just need to like think about stuff, write a little bit of code, let the machines do what they want to do. I don't think that's going to happen, but speculation is fun. Git's how we get things done every single day. For this moment, for now, and there's no reason to believe that's going to change anytime soon. So building up your Git skills is super important. I can sit here and ponder and speculate all I want, but there's probably some actual practical things that you should get out of this. If you're an early stage developer, take the Get It Done course at Learning Git Branching at .js.org. I think it's free. I'm relatively sure it's free, but don't concern yourself about what you're actually using Git for. Go and do some documentation on a thing. Learn how to fork a repo. Learn how to do all the things that you need to do. Clone, get things local. Work on it. Don't worry about necessarily writing code. Worry about just getting familiar with Git. If you've been around the block a couple times, start learning more of the advanced functions of Git. There's lots of resources for this. Really dig into advancing your Git skills and improving your workflows. Senior developers should be looking at ways to make it easier to onboard new people and take advantage of the flows that the mid-level people are learning so that they can make better workflows and make things more accessible. And of course, you can always leverage Git Butler tools because they're pretty awesome and they help regardless of where you are in your career. So in conclusion, Git's old. I'm old. We established those two things are true. Improving Git skills for you and your team is super important. Newer developers are not coming in with them. The better Git skills you have, the better you can teach them. That's key. AI is probably going to have a huge effect on version control. So this is my third conference of 3. Thank God I get to go home tomorrow. Where I've talked to a lot of people about Git and version control. And one of the things that they often say is, I implicitly trust my LLM, or I totally don't understand Git and it scares me, or GitHub's terrible. Did you build a new GitHub? No, we did not. So you have to make this willing, you have to make this conscious choice, and I'm going to make myself better at Git so I can be a better developer. No one can predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen. But like I said, it's fun to speculate. It's fun to see what's going on. I think we have a lot of great tools that we can use right now to improve things, get things better, and move forward. So check them out. Become a better Git developer, become a better developer, and make the world a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No problem. If anyone has questions, I think I can answer them at the booth. Or I can make Caleb answer them at the booth. He's smarter than me.
Are there any questions? All right. No.
So one of the challenges that we have is emerge conflicts with Git.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, is that something you guys have any solution for?
Yeah, we definitely do. We definitely do. Let's talk about that more specifically at the table because sometimes hashtag not all merge conflicts. But part of the reason we built the tool is to help you to more clearly see and avoid things like that. In my mind, that's like one of the biggest pieces because like I said, a lot of times when someone has a merge conflict, immediate panic sets in. And so much damage gets done and so much time gets wasted by not handling a merge conflict correctly or in a sane, calm way. We definitely handle things like that. And like I mentioned, it's free, so you can check it out and see how it works for you.
Can you, with Git Butler, do you guys have things like guardrails? Guardrails is a feature that you can put in place that
I would say not really. Before I joined Git Butler, I was an AI developer. So guardrails to me is putting something different in my head. But it's a very different concept. But we don't try to prevent you from making mistakes. And the reason why is because we couldn't possibly know every workflow of everyone who's ever going to use the product. So to us, it's more important that we give you the options to resolve things when they come up, less so that we try to guess what you're going to do and prevent it. If we could figure that out, like, we would be geniuses, and we would definitely be charging money for it.
Using Git to like enforce linear commit history and certain like standards so that we can keep our Git history clean. But I find that some of our junior members still don't understand what that means.
Exactly. And that's why I think, like, I mean, it's as simple as like have a lunch and learn where you just sit around, everybody brings a brown bag, and you say, like, this is why we do the things we do. Because juniors aren't like, we're like, oh, well, developers are smart people. They'll probably just pick it up as they go. Don't ever hope they're going to pick it up as they go. Explicitly state how these things work.
And that's why I use Git to like
Yeah.
enforce that, because I was reading like rebase was a very difficult concept.
Oh, yeah. Well, you notice Rebase was not in that list of things people know. It definitely was not on that list.
So, one thing I've run into is dealing with content creators, writers, and whatnot that are not technical at all, don't know what the command line terminal is, and aren't going to learn it, and trying to get them onboarded with some sort of version control, so that 10 changes down the line, you still roll back and realize you made mistakes with it. What tools are good? I don't know if Git Butler to that, or if there's other tools.
I mean, yeah.
That flow, that GUI flow a little bit better.
Yeah, Git Butler is good for, I mean, it depends on what they're building the content in. Like, so when I was at IBM, I was ostensibly hired to be the team lead for the AI advocacy team. And I didn't know anything about AI. I was supposed to teach them about DevRel. I ended up teaching them about Git. Because while they were all brilliant PhDs, they had no idea how to freaking use Git. But and if there was a tool like Git Butler, it would have been simple. You can use things like GitHub Desktop because it integrates directly. Like that works well too, especially at that kind of low level of usage. But yeah, anything that visualizes it a lot of times for people who are non-technical, it makes it a lot easier. So I would say, yeah, find the visual tool that works for you. Git Butler's the best. And put that in front of them and say, like, listen, look, watch. You can see your progression. You can see your versioning. You can see like where this was and where it is now. Because trying to teach non-technical people to use a terminal or CLI, nightmare. Absolute nightmare. Right. Right. In the same way, like one of the best visual tools for content creation, I can't believe I'm going to say this, is when Microsoft Windows Word came up with the view revisions button, and you could actually see it. And you could see every version of that document, and it was a mess, and it was a nightmare to look at. But like having something like that, which is something like a lot of these visual tools do, makes it a lot easier. It just makes it a lot easier.
Awesome. Thank you, PJ.
Thank you.